States. We acted together as millions, and we brought it down. This was a great victory for web freedom.
My name is Loz Kay, and I'm currently leader of the Pirate Party in the United Kingdom. A lot of my passion for a lot of the things that the Pirate Party is about comes from caring about free culture.
My name is Persephone Hallow. My age is 25. My education is, I have a BA in English Literature from the University of York. And I got into the Pirate Party actually through, I was always interested in politics, but then my partner's interest in the Pirate Party really got me interested in it, and the copyright issues, since I'm a writer, it very much interested me, the idea of changing copyright.
I'm Andy Halsell, I'm the Pirate Party's campaigns officer. My role in the Pirate Party is essentially to run campaigns, national and local election campaigns. I've been doing that for the last 2 years. How I got involved in the Pirate Party just after the Swedish Pirate Party had their successes in Sweden. The thing that struck me at that point was the passion with the people who were involved in that Manchester campaign and what they wanted to change, what they saw as important, things like the internet and being able to share information and ideas freely. But also civil liberties and the ability for people to properly decide their own ideas in terms of politics.
My name is Ed Geraghty, and my educational background is I have a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science. I currently work as a commodities trader in central London, and around the time of the formation of the Pirate Parties I was working as a programmer, and I've been keeping an eye on the rise of them in Sweden, and it was a fantastic idea. And when I saw that they'd finally got around to launching one in the UK, I joined within 2 or 3 days.
I'm Sam Clark. I'm currently studying at Sheffield Hallam University, and I also run my own business as well. We do IT consultancy and web design and things like that. I am the treasurer for the Pirate Party, so basically I handle all the money and make sure nobody spends too much.
I'm Maria Aretulaki. I come from Greece, originally from Greece, but I spent the last 20 years between the UK and Germany. I started off as a linguist, theoretical linguist. Then I moved to computational linguistics and machine translation and automatic text summarization. And for the past 18 years, I've been working on spoken dialogue systems. That was 2010. And I guess it was fresh at the time anyway, at least the UK Pirate Party. But basically through them, you know, I looked it up on the internet. Pirate Party, what's that? Are they anarchists? That was my first concern. Are they anarchists? And I looked that up and I saw, okay, they're interested in how citizens' rights have been augmented to include digital rights in the current digital and internet era.
I'm a lecturer at the University of Manchester, and I lecture in linguistics. With the Pirate Party, well, largely initially through my academic work, I've been very involved in questions of open access, access to academic knowledge, research output. Well, in the manifesto we have these 7 principles, and really to me the first one was the most important. The idea that that we are founded as a society on the sharing of knowledge and ideas.
Comic Beppe Grillo drew tens of thousands to a Rome rally on Friday, showing the potential of his anti-establishment five-star movement to surprise in Sunday's European vote, as it did in the national election last year.
start by making a tweet for my followers, if you don't mind.
Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, has launched a political party to contest Australia's elections.
Crowdsourcing something when it comes to policy is really important, because you have a huge number of people who aren't necessarily engaged in politics who want to discuss politics, and occasionally, often, people have ideas that they want to get out there and they're ignored, because if you're one person it's quite hard to get a political party to listen to what you're saying. But if you can talk to a load of people who are like-minded, then the information and ideas that you're proposing can rise to the top, essentially, and it means that anybody can get involved, and you've got a sort of almost peer review process happening all the time. It's the wisdom of crowds without the mob mentality that we're looking for in Policy Beta, for example. So crowdsourcing means we get the biggest possible base of ideas in, and then we have a huge number of eyes to look at what we're doing, to sanity check it, much like open source projects, where you've got a lot of people looking at what's coming in and making sure that the output at the end of it is still sane. We will have checks and balances in there in terms of the requirement for evidence and the requirement for the adherence to principles, for example. So it's not entirely a free-for-all. This is the idea of separating the mob mentality, I guess, from the wisdom of crowds. But it gives us the biggest base possible, and it makes us as inclusive as possible.
Crowdsourcing, it's like peer reviewing in a science. You need that input from somebody else because no one's ever got the right idea, and the more minds you can get on a certain policy or certain anything, the better it will become naturally. Just the better it will, and the more refined it will become.
It's something that allows us to bring in ideas from a much wider range of people than has ever previously been possible in policy making, and that is really exciting, just to have that diversity of views represented. And I think there's another side of the coin too, which is that once we start inviting people to contribute their ideas like this, that leads to them feeling more enfranchised and more involved and more like they can make an impact on the political process.
The Pirate Party is a collection of loosely affiliated technophilic groups in civil society and in business who have recognized a mutual interest in pursuing liberalization of copyright rules, and they have come together to formalize more or less a consistent platform, political platform around digital rights. These digital rights are centered around free speech on the internet and access to greater access to knowledge and culture on the internet, and greater access to government decision making, and privacy issues, particularly online privacy and the right to not be surveilled.
I think it's a fascinating development. It's hard to tell how much a real impact it has and whether they have a governing philosophy or a specific cause. And I think it would be exciting to see that starting point of piracy emerge as a full philosophy about what government might look like. And is that philosophy purely libertarian, or does it have a strong communitarian dimension which allows us to work together toward the common good?
Crowdsourcing is a really important idea in terms of what we're about, and that's what's actually marked out the Pirate Party movement. In a way, a lot of people say, quite often said, well, your ideas, once you've made them, they say, perhaps that seems quite similar to the Green Party, or that seems similar to liberal commentators, even to conservative ones sometimes. That may be the case in individual things. But I think the process of how we do things is the really radical thing.
Crowdsourcing never works top down. So if you start and believe that you're going to do a crowdsourcing project, well, good luck. That's not how it works, right? So it's almost accidental. And I don't want to create a new mystery, because that's not at all in my intention. But the cases in which crowdsourcing works and doesn't work, precisely because you cannot take those previous experiences from other contexts and then migrate them and take them with you in a new context. That doesn't work. Crowdsourcing works when there is that initial moment of excitement and engagement, and once that fades away, the crowd disperses, and it's very hard, if not impossible, to bring them together again.
We are facing problems of democracy today. Yeah, not enough people are interested in politics, in democracy. A lot of people feel frustrated about the political system. A lot of people don't have the motivation and the time to engage in politics. Yeah? So it's also made of resources, time. Yeah, when you are struggling to make ends meet. Yeah, and and the economy in Britain enforces precarious labor and people working very long hours. So if you're struggling, maybe you simply don't have time and motivation for also doing politics. So a lot of times those people who are interested in politics and democracy are the usual suspects, the young middle class, yeah, also urban, the new bourgeoisie, who are knowledge workers and work in hipsterish jobs, like in the tech part of Shoreditch in London and so on. So it's a specific people who are interested in politics nowadays, and are fostering these ideas that technology will help us, social media, the internet will help us to build a better democracy. I'm not completely dismissive of the potential of technology to improve democracy, but there is no technological fix to political problems. There are reasons why people feel frustrated about contemporary democracy. It has to do with the actual disempowerments that politics is causing in society.
That there's a vast number of people out there who aren't. It's wrong to say they're apathetic. It's also it's like, well, it's just how is the right way to engage with ideas, because everybody does care about stuff. And that was essentially where we were coming from. See, there's a major problem which we don't particularly have any answers to yet.
Also, it's, the interface and the platform stuff is going to be more recognizable to a millennial than even just the political landscape.
Yeah.
You know, so you're kind of with a younger generation, you were able to kind of teach how to engage with politics via the platform.
Back in 2012, we launched a process to broaden our manifesto, because that was one of the key pieces of feedback that we had. It's very concrete, actually, that people liked the core of what we stood for, but felt they couldn't vote for us without a broader idea of what we stand for. So we crowdsourced our 2012 manifesto, which is the basis of what we have. It was just the start point, because there's a lot more that needed refining out of that process. In a way, it was just a kind of version of Reddit. Well, you know, we built it on the Reddit platform. People could suggest things, vote things up and down, discuss them. But it seemed to us that we had to have a process to refine it better and more professionally. So that's essentially what Policy Beta is.
At the time when we were doing Policy Alpha, I was very heavily involved with the Pirate Party's IT team. I've since pretty much moved on from there. But my background as a programmer and doing sysadmin type things was actually quite useful. We were originally planning to run our very own Reddit instance on a box which we'd been donated, quite a big server, and we'd been donated that to run it, and we were trying to set up our very own Reddit instance because it is open source. But we started to run out of time, effectively, and several of the people in our party are quite prolific Reddit users. And we came to the conclusion that actually, if we want to reach far more people, the way to do it is to not run our own instance of this thing, even though it might be a technically better solution for us. If we ran our very own instance of it, then we're getting rid of a massive amount of the participants on Reddit. So why don't we just run our own subreddit and ask people for any information? And that's what we ended up doing.
Policy Beta is a platform that we're developing. Basically, what we realised was that there is a need for people to be able to make collaborative decisions. Within a political party, collaborative decisions about policy are really important. Being able to gather ideas, talk about those ideas, provide evidence to support those ideas, and then communicate those ideas, essentially. When we looked at how to develop a manifesto almost a year ago now, we wanted to engage with as many people as possible. We used all sorts of social media platforms to do that, including Reddit, Twitter. We used traditional means like telephones and letters even. And the end result was really inspiring in a sense, because lots of people got involved and talked and chatted about policy, and we had about ideas really, and we converted that into policy. Policy Beta we want to take to the next step. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to submit ideas. We want it to be as easy as possible to discuss those ideas, convert them into policy and support them with evidence. And hopefully at the end of that, have a system that allows us to continually refresh our policy based on what is known right now. And if it turns out we're wrong, that we're in a position where we can change policy rapidly. It's about making sure that everybody has input too, so something that's very open and very transparent. You can see why our policy is changing, for example, which I think other parties would have difficulty in showing. Often it's simply what's popular, as opposed to a mixture of what people want to do and also what's right to do, and what there is evidence to suggest will actually do what it is you want to do.
My understanding of Policy Beta is that it's a new system, a new technology essentially for web-based sourcing of policies and for management of the whole policy process, from proposing policies through to the ratification of the policies by other members of the party.
So, as an initiator, I would go onto the website and say I have a problem that I wish to solve. So I add the problem I wish to solve, and then wait for
comments. And I don't even have to log in to be able at phase 1 to comment on the problem that you have. And hopefully other commenters come in and join as well.
And they like your comments or don't like your comments.
And then I would carry on the conversation with the commenter as the leader of the discussion, and I would just go through and then tag things and add more stuff, add more evidence that we found.
And everybody who's watching and participating is voting up and down different comments.
Yeah. And then I have the same problem, and I come in and I have my little bit of the problem that I think also needs to be dealt with, and then hopefully somebody comments on that.
Yeah. And eventually we get to a point where we've agreed that this is a problem that needs to go into our problem field, where we keep all of our existing problems. And so then it gets pinged over to the admin.
The admin would then, the automated system would then lift that into a phase 2 level, which would end up adding some more boxes at the top where the main commenter would be able to summarise and collate all of the comments and all of the evidence found and all of the information into only just a few, 3 or 4 different boxes, a very summarised version of that.
From that you'd have a checklist that it needs to fulfill, which is the evidence. That's where you'd be having call for action tags and some sort of scoring system based on the information that's there, and it needs to fulfill to get it to a threshold before it can then move on.
And once it hits the threshold and everybody's happy, it gets passed over to the party at P3 for a review.
Which is the yes-no vote.
Yes, which is, well, the scheduled yes-no vote. It gets included in the next vote. Yes.
And then once that has been voted yes, the policy is then taken off into the new policy document, and then the wording from the policy from phase 3 is pushed back into phase 1 to start the cycle to get new evidence and new comments.
Where I disagree with it vociferously because I've changed my mind.
Absolutely. Then we have that positive. And if it gets voted no at that point, then it automatically goes back to 1 but isn't pushed out into policy, because it obviously needs more discussion and more evidence before it will be accepted by the party.
Great.
Yeah?
That's it. I think that's it.
If you ask 1,000 different people, you get 1,000 different answers to what they think internet freedom is. But for me, it's the ability to communicate without borders, without social class being imposed, without ageism, without anything which can be taken from your physical appearance or your age or anything which people will immediately make snap judgments of you for. It's underpinned by the fact that no one owns the internet, no one owns the infrastructure on which it runs. It's a mostly decentralized network of people. I mean, everyone with a mobile phone is as much part of the internet as some of the big servers running Google. Everyone with a phone line is as much part of the internet. So the ability for everybody to be able to tap into this wonderful resource of the entirety of man's knowledge at the push of a button. Cute cat photos, but the freedom to exchange information in a way which is not impeded by governments or by other people is probably how I would describe it.
Possibility for anyone to access any web page out there. That would be a basic definition. And that, of course, automatically goes with not having web pages blocked and filters deciding what is a good and what is a bad website.
The heart of that fight is to make sure that we have a democratic say in what's going on, and that also that there is not a disproportionate power from governments, courts and corporations. So this is why issues like net neutrality are important, because that's essentially about how corporations might essentially reduce the ability to share information.
Keeping the internet free and open, and just being able to share information as you want, and not going down the net neutrality, or going down the net neutrality route rather, not closing the internet off, that you have to pay per subscription, you don't pay for this and that, and the internet is just a platform to do many things on, and it needs to remain a place where you can do many things, not just one thing.
Internet freedom essentially is the ability to express and to share online, which allows essentially for greater freedom of expression throughout the world between different groups, including political groups, and it's something that is scarcely protected, unfortunately. We've had recent comments come out of our current government saying that YouTube videos are being flagged as containing extreme content, for example. Now, a lot of people would say that the Pirate Party is an extreme party in some ways, or a radical party, let's say, that we have radical views politically. But radical doesn't mean the same thing as violent. Gandhi was as radical as Hitler was, even though they took completely different paths, and I think it's very dangerous that we're starting to have this sort of censorship. So internet freedom is about protecting the freedom of speech online.
Internet freedom has a long history, and I think what it indexes is a politics that the internet is a major part of, in which we've now got a kind of set of political conflicts around information that we didn't have previously. So the last 30 years, the context of both digitisation and the rise of the internet give us radically reduced costs of producing, remixing and distributing all kinds of information, whether it's films, audio programs, photos, whatever. So we have this massive increase of amounts of information alongside massive increases in access to information. So information where you would have had to have gone to a library, found that they didn't have the journal you wanted, ordered, all of that's now available online pretty much. There are issues of access for who can get to it, but it's potentially all there. So we now live in a period which is quite a reversal, where information, if anything, there's too much information. Our difficulties are handling the amounts of information we can get access to. And in that context, information freedom becomes really important because it indexes the politics of that. The politics of how do we produce information, who controls the information produced, how is information defined as a property, you know, whose property is it? All of those questions around information freedom. So I think all of the kind of different things like pirate parties, or like Anonymous, or like the hacktivists of the 1990s, or like the hackers of the 1990s, they all had a discourse around freedom of information. At its simplest, it was about free, secure access to information.
Internet freedom is a must. I mean, I think there's no clearer way of putting it than that. We cannot compromise on the internet being completely free, completely, I would argue, unregulated, essentially. There should not be a formal body or bodies that have sole responsibility. The internet should be run, insofar as it's even sensible to talk about the internet being run, by consensus, through a gradual process, by its users.
Internet freedom is the freedom, I guess, to share information online. It's the freedom to go and look at what you would like to look at online. It's the freedom to make an active choice in what you do online. You know, the ability to use it for political purposes if you want, the ability to use it in whatever means you like, in any other means that you want. It's not a free-for-all. Freedom, like everything else, has limits, but those limits have to be clear, not arbitrary, and certainly not coming from interest groups or on the back, not on the back of legislation and not on the back of public discussion, but on the back of what, for example, ISPs fancy doing on a given week. I mean, I have to say, ISPs are in a really horrible position to a certain extent because they face pressure from all sides. But you know, for a free internet, they should be delivering essentially a way to get onto a network. They shouldn't be offering, or they shouldn't be seen as a vehicle for, or as a primary vehicle for offering content, or as the gatekeepers to the internet. They should be there simply as access providers. And you know, that's what I see as an open internet, an internet where anybody can get on, anybody can go set up a blog, anybody can go and set up whatever they want at home. If they want to go and run, you know, a website from their bedroom, that's fine. And if they just want to go and access, you know, if they just want to watch iPlayer, if they just want to access large corporate media, that's up to them too, that's fine too. But I want people to have the freedom of choice to do that.